If you were eagerly anticipating the day when Tier 7 would no longer have to contend with 32mm Overmatch, then I'm sorry to report to you that that day is never going to come to World of Warships Legends with the debut of the Tier 8 IJN Premium Battleship Musashi, the sister ship to the legendary tier battleship Yamato, and for all intents and purposes, these are the same ships. The differences are minimal. They include only the fact that the Musashi has worse accuracy than the Yamato. I've been told it's got a value of 1.6 sigma, whereas the Yamato has a much higher sigma value, meaning its guns are more accurate. But the Musashi has the same gun size as the Yamato, 460mm guns, which means they can overmatch 32mm bow plating, and as we probably already know, most battleships in the game at these higher tiers have 32mm of plating on both their bows and sterns. So the Musashi, like the Yamato, can overmatch all of them, and because of its placement at Tier 8, well, that means when the +2, -2 matchmaking for Tier 7 through Legendary tier matchmaking is turned off, and it might have been already. Honestly, I'm not sure. I can't remember if I've seen any Tier 7s in my Legendary tier games lately, but once it's turned off, that means Tier 7 can still be up-tiered to Tier 8, and this is, of course, a Tier 8 ship. So if you were happy to see the fact that Tier 8 was added because it meant you would no longer have to face Yamato in your Tier 7 ships, well, prepare to be sad because this is basically Yamato. And like I said, the only real differences are that these guns are less accurate, and I think the Musashi has worse anti-aircraft firepower than the Yamato. Otherwise, they're pretty similar in terms of stats. Looks like the Musashi has a few less hit points, and there may be some minor variations in statistics on things like turret traverse time or the like, but the differences are so minimal that it really doesn't matter. The question is, do you notice the accuracy differences on the Musashi versus the Yamato? And I'm going to be real with you. At first I thought I noticed them, but then I went and played the Yamato again, and I honestly can't tell the difference between the two ships. Now, it might be my build, because I am using Takagi, of course, as my commander, but I've chosen one of his inspirations to be the new Italian battleship commander. I think his name is Iachino. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but his base trait tightens up the shell grouping on the battleship's main battery guns based on the target that you're shooting at. So the buff is the greatest if you're shooting at cruisers, and the buff is the most minimal when you're shooting at battleships. But either way, it does seem to have a pretty significant effect on the accuracy. And I find that about half the time, the Musashi's guns seem quite accurate indeed under this build, and then half the time they suffer from what I like to call the bullshit IJN dispersion, where the shells go everywhere except for the target. So you're going to have to deal with some wonky, inaccurate salvos from time to time when you're playing the Musashi, but really it doesn't matter because these guns are the biggest guns in the game, and they have a very good reload of 26 seconds when you choose the main battery reload module in the 4th module slot. So really, if you're thinking about, should I spend the $2,500 doubloon amount to purchase the Admiralty backing in order to grind out the campaign and get the Musashi? I don't think there's any question to it. This is the battleship with the biggest guns at the game, a tier lower than it should be, and, well, it still enjoys the same overmatch that Yamato did when it was constantly facing tier 7s. So, if you enjoyed having that overmatch and were sad that you weren't able to inflict it upon tier 7 ships, here's your chance to do it yet again. And if you were happy that your tier 7 ships didn't have to be subjected to this overmatch, well, sorry, because the Musashi is coming. And I suspect that pretty much everybody is going to be after this ship, because I mean, it is, for all intents and purposes, the Yamato, a tier lower, with basically all of the benefits and really none of the drawbacks, aside from the fact that it really has no AA firepower to speak of. In fact, if you take a close look at the ship, you'll notice it has nowhere near as many turrets along the sides as the Yamato did, and I apologize if you hear any jingling over there. That would be Brutus, the dog that lives with me right now. Sounds like he was shaking off, shaking off the feeling that the Musashi being added to the game is perhaps not the best thing for the game. I don't know. Brutus, do you have anything to say on that? Can you speak? No, Brutus has nothing to say. His silence is an indication that he is displeased with this change, I am sure. And I'm sure some members of the community will be as well. But I think I've told you pretty much everything you really need to know about the Musashi. The question is, how do you deal with the Musashi if you're in a Tier 7 battleship with an overmatchable bow and an overmatchable stern? Well, I'll tell you how. Get the idea that bow tanking is the be-all, end-all of keeping yourself safe out of your head when you're playing your Tier 7 battleships and you see a Musashi. This is something that everybody should have learned going through all the Tier 6 battleships, which have overmatchable bows and sterns by pretty much every other ship at that tier. It should have been clear to players playing through Tier 6 that bow tanking other battleships is not a viable strategy for keeping yourself safe. Instead, you need to angle your side armor against the enemy battleships and get them to shoot you in your angled side rather than on your bow or your stern where they can overmatch you. That's what you have to do in a Tier 7 battleship versus the Musashi or the Yamato in cases past. And so long as you maintain proper angling, most of the Tier 7 battleships have enough citadel armor and belt armor to bounce 18-inch shells. You just have to angle the armor, and you have to get the idea out of your head that the only way to angle armor is to bow tank. That is not the case. Nevertheless, I can understand why people would be upset to see this ship debut in the game at Tier 8, because it does have the 32mm overmatch capability, and there is no doubt that having that capability is very significant. The ability to overmatch all battleships at Tier 7 and pretty much Tier 8, except for those with robust armor protection in the form of icebreaker schemes. Think the Germans, like the GK. I think the FDG also has an icebreaker. The Sovietsky Soyuz might as well. I'm not entirely sure, but aside from certain exceptions like these, pretty much every battleship can be overmatched through the bow by the Musashi. And if you are going to get it, you can expect it to play basically like the Yamato. Now, as for what we're doing in this game, well, this game is going to end with a Kraken Unleashed on my part. That's why I've decided to show it to you. It's not the most impressive amount of damage you've ever seen, and it's a highlight from my stream on Monday, so if it looks familiar to you, that's why. But as you can see, my team has plowed through the Alpha Cap. We've managed to take it, while the Reds have taken both Bravo and Charlie. I'm sort of waiting for that destroyer to maybe be spotted again, so that hopefully I can demolish him. But we've got Battleship Edinburgh over here, and we're going to shoot at him because, of course, our shells overmatch him pretty much everywhere. And there we see an example of 3 overpenetrations against a broadside cruiser, which with guns this size is something that you might come to expect, although maybe you wouldn't expect it too much on British cruisers since they have citadels the size of, honestly, some other cruisers in this game. But now, we're going to take it slowly here. We have lost a lot of hit points. One thing I think is different between the Musashi and the Yamato is that the side armor on the Musashi might be a little bit thinner. The upper belt armor, I think, is only 32mm, and I want to say it's a little bit more than that on the Yamato. Honestly, I could be wrong, but again, for all intents and purposes, this ship and the Yamato are the same. The only difference is the tier placement and the lack of AA firepower on the part of the Musashi. Here's one enemy Musashi running away toward the border of the map. Obviously, he has bought out the campaign immediately, and he's only shooting at us with his back gun. Meanwhile, we're shooting at him with all of our guns. You can see there his stern armor getting overmatched by one of our shells, while the rest ricochet. But if you've got a battleship like that enemy Musashi traveling straight for the map border and attempting to, I don't know, go to the next map, perhaps locate the mythical two brothers, who knows what he's doing? Whatever he's doing, he is not having an effect on the game. All the action is happening around the Bravo cap, so we've turned around and we are trying to bring our guns to bear on the Edinburgh over here, who's just peeked out from behind an island and now has his broadside exposed to us once again. We did not manage to connect with that broadside and destroy the Edinburgh on the first try, but you know what they say, second time is a charm. There you can see some very terrible dispersion, or at least it looked like it, but one of the shells manages to find the citadel of the Edinburgh and he goes down. There's our second kill of the game. There are 3 ships left alive, and spoiler alert, we're going to hunt down and destroy all 3 of them. Starting with, I think, the destroyer first. Note that we are spotted. Our concealment has gone down to its normal detectability range with the concealment mod and Kondo as one inspiration on my commander. We've got a 13.1 kilometer detectability by sea. The fact that we are spotted indicates that the enemy destroyer is within 13.1 kilometers of us. We're just not quite sure exactly where he is. So one thing we're going to want to do is avoid sailing in a straight line as we are doing right now. Sailing in a straight line can be a death sentence, and what do you know, there's the ZF6, so as soon as he's spotted, we kick it to a full stop to bring our speed down as low as it can possibly go. We go into reverse to come to a stop even quicker, and we try to turn a little bit to the left there to avoid the torpedoes, and we mostly end up avoiding all of them. We do take one on the nose, but that's okay because it gives us the opportunity to demolish the enemy Z46, who goes down as our 3rd kill of the game. That leaves only the enemy CV and the Musashi we were chasing a little bit earlier. They're going to be no problem for us to take down, and we aren't going to really finish this game with a hugely impressive amount of damage, but we are going to finish with a Kraken, and I think Krakens are always worth showing on YouTube, whether or not the damage is spectacular. And certainly this ship is capable of much more damage than I'm going to do with it in this game. But aside from the kill count, the total amount of damage done, and the impact that I've had on the battle with this ship, honestly, this is probably what you can expect from your typical average Musashi game if you are a fairly experienced player like I am. You can expect this ship to perform pretty well for you, and to be honest with you, I can see no reason why anybody would not want to get the Musashi. I mean, it is a Yamato, but it's at a lower tier, which means you get the ability to terrorize lower tier ships, whereas in the Yamato, you only get the ability to fight tier 8 ships, or at least you will, when the matchmaking is reverted back to the 1+1, or 1+1-1 matchmaking rule. Just be sure that you lead your shots accordingly to aim for the correct location on enemy aircraft carriers when they're spotted. Probably don't try to hit them right in the bow, because that's not where their citadel is. I bet the citadel on the saipan is located by the smokestacks. Well, I guess we'll never know, because we're doomed to over-penetrations on this guy, despite the fact he is broadside to us. It's because he has no armor. Let's try again here, see if we can't get the citadel on the Musashi. Who knows where those torpedoes came from? There is the citadel, and not on the Musashi, but on the saipan. That just leaves the enemy Musashi left. 4 kills, 100,000 damage done. We're going to get the Kraken here because the enemy Musashi, he's not exactly making it difficult for us. Maybe he's trying to angle a little bit away. I don't know, but at this point he's giving flat broadside, and, well, if you've played the Yamato, you know the citadel on it is quite exposed and quite vulnerable, and if you give any kind of broadside, you're liable to be punished harshly, as that Musashi was. So if you do end up getting the Musashi, be sure not to give broadside in it. It's also got the same cheek citadel weakness as the Yamato, So if you are going to go bow on to other battleships, you want to point your bow straight at them and not really angle, but this is not really a ship that you want to push into battleships at close range and brawl with. You're going to get rammed because you're not exactly fast, or you're going to get hit through the cheek and citadeled, one of the two. So play it like you would the Yamato, and enjoy your ability to terrorize Tier 7 cruisers. That's really all I've got to say on this ship. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.